All right, today we're jumping into a huge idea, one that has really shaped our world for the last 100 years or so, idealism. And we're going to do it by looking at the guy who basically put it on the map, President Woodrow Wilson, and his incredibly ambitious dream to build a totally new kind of world. So, let's just kick things off with the question that's at the heart of everything we're talking about today. Is the world just a dog-eat-dog place? A constant, brutal fight where might makes right? Or is it possible for us as nations to work together and actually build something more peaceful, something better? This is the big debate. And that question, right there, sets up this classic showdown between two completely different ways of seeing things. In one corner, you've got realism, the old school view that it's all about power and looking out for number one. And in the other corner, you have idealism, this really hopeful belief that cooperation and morality can actually guide us. It's a tale of two worlds. Okay, so section 1. Let's really break down what this radically hopeful idea is all about. What's at the core of idealism? At its heart, idealism is basically a giant no to the idea that war and conflict are just the way things are. Idealists believe that if we use our brains, stick to some moral values, and build strong international groups, we can literally change the rules of the game and get past those endless power struggles. So this whole belief system really stands on a few key pillars. First, idealists believe that people are, at their core, pretty decent and capable of getting better. They think things like international law, treaties and global organizations aren't just for show. They can actually work to stop wars. And maybe the biggest one, foreign policy shouldn't just be about what's in it for me. It should be about doing the right thing.
All right, so who's the person who took this big, hopeful idea out of the lecture halls and put it on the world stage? Well, meet the idealist in chief.
Look, to really get Wilson, you have to know he wasn't your typical politician. He was an academic, a college president, and a man with a really deep religious faith. He wasn't just playing politics, he truly, genuinely believed that America had this special duty, a moral calling even, to help make the world a better, more democratic place. That belief drove everything he did.
Okay, so picture this. World War I has just torn Europe apart. It's absolute devastation. And in the middle of all that chaos, Wilson doesn't just show up with some vague hopes and dreams. No, he comes with an actual plan, a blueprint for peace designed to rebuild the world from the ground up.
And that plan was his legendary 14 points. I mean, just look at this stuff. No more secret backroom deals, freedom on the seas, lowering the number of weapons, letting people choose their own governments. You have to understand this was completely radical for its time. It was a total break from the way Europe had been running things for centuries, which was all about empires and secret alliances. But of all those points, there was one that was the absolute linchpin, the single most important piece of the whole puzzle, and that was the League of Nations. Wilson's big idea was for this global club where countries could talk out their problems instead of shooting at each other, providing security for everyone, not just the big guys. So, you have this beautiful vision, this grand plan. What happens when it slams into the messy, complicated real world? Well, this is where the dream hits a brick wall. And wow, was it a collision. Wilson's ideal of collective security, the whole point of the League, it got torpedoed when his own government, the US Senate, refused to join. His dream of a peace without victory? Nope, the European allies wanted revenge and slammed Germany with harsh terms. Open diplomacy? Forget about it. The same old secret deals were happening behind the scenes. The gap between what he wanted and what he got was just massive. And let's dig into that a little deeper. Take his big idea of moral diplomacy, basically that America should only support other democracies. Sounds great, right? Super noble. But how did that actually play out in the real world? This is where things get messy. For all the talk about letting nations rule themselves, the Wilson administration sent troops to occupy Haiti, the Dominican Republic, and Mexico. That famous idea of self-determination, well, it seemed to apply mostly to Europeans, not so much to people living in colonies. And the whole time, his big vision was getting chipped away by his own allies, who were way more interested in their own power. It shows a massive contradiction, right? The ideals were lofty, but the reality on the ground was, well, something else.
So the story's over, right? The dream failed. The end. Well, not so fast. Because this is where we get to the really interesting part, the afterlife of these ideas. You could call it the ghost of idealism.
Yeah, in his lifetime, Wilson's plan was a total political failure. He left office a broken man, having seen his own country turn its back on his life's work. But the ideas he championed, the ones about working together, about international law, about morality in politics, they were out there now, and they were just too big to ignore. They planted seeds for the future.
And you can see how those ideas stuck around just by looking at how people talk about him today. Take this comment, for example. Woodrow Wilson was an idealist who sought to make the world safe for democracy, envisioned a world where a League of Nations would make warfare less likely. That pretty much nails it.
Or here's another one that really gets to the core principles that are still with us. Wilsonian idealism. Every nation deserves the right to elect its own government and freedom from belligerence by outside powers. That's an idea that has had some serious staying power. So when you step back and look at the long game, what's the real legacy of this supposedly failed idea? Well, for starters, the United Nations is basically League of Nations 2.0. The whole global financial system we have, influenced by these ideas. The push to promote democracy around the world, that's a huge part of Wilson's echo. He completely changed the conversation, forcing countries to at least talk about moral governance, even if they don't always live up to it. And that brings us full circle, right back to that big question we started with. Wilson's whole story is this incredible, frustrating mix of high hopes and harsh realities. So I'll leave you with this to chew on. Is idealism, this dream of a better world built on cooperation and morality, is it just a naive fantasy? Or, even with all the failures and all the hypocrisies, is it a dream we absolutely have to keep chasing?